Hey there, self-love pioneers. This is the final video for Self-Love September 2017. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting if you've commented. Thank you so much for using the hashtags if you've done so. I've had a really good time exploring so many different areas of self-love, so many things that have been whirring around in my brain box since I did this the year before. It's been a really interesting opportunity to get a lot of new thoughts and ideas out to you, and I could not end this year's Self-Love September extravaganza without touching on this, because it's something that has been quite hotly requested, particularly since the election of a certain man in the White House. I've noticed that the requests for this have come really quite thick and fast since that time. So I feel like it is time to address this, and I can definitely do so under the umbrella of self-love. It's for sure a very self-loving dialogue, and it's something that I think we can all stand to think about when it comes to activism, when it comes to being in service, when it comes to taking action for social responsibility, thinking about those less fortunate than us, working on behalf of the planet and campaigning for the planet. Any of those things, anything under that umbrella, that's what I'm going to be focusing on for this particular resource. So grab a beverage. There is a lot of things that I want to get through. There's a lot I want to talk about. I'm going to try to shave it down so that it averages out between the 20 and 30 minute mark, as most of the resources have been. I think the average is around 25 minutes for the resources I've done, so I'm going to try and keep it to that, although there is so much that I want to say on this topic. But I want to try and keep it to basically how you can be self-loving and self-caring whilst involved in social activism, whilst doing your part for the plight of certain people, working on behalf of the planet, etc., doing good work to try to create change where change needs to be created, working for marginalised groups of people, focusing on issues that are going on that really should not be going on, and doing your part to actually help with that. I want to talk about doing that self-lovingly. I know a lot of people have a lot of issues with that, and that's why this topic was so hotly requested. I know there are other people that watch my stuff that really feel that they want to do something. They feel like they're not currently engaged in social activism, they're not currently playing their part, and they want to do something, but they fear not being able to do it self-lovingly. They fear not being able to do it whilst also thinking about their own needs and knowing how to set the limitations for what they do. So I want to get into that a little bit as well today. So hopefully this resource will be useful on a number of different levels, whether you're currently involved in any kind of activism or being of service publicly, or whether you are thinking about becoming more involved but you just want to know how to do it safely, how to do it in a way that's not going to be psycho-spiritually damaging for you. I just want to get the first thing off my chest right now, because I feel like this is something I've been wanting to really say on the channel since there was this great big dialogue last year about being vocal about the Black Lives Matter movement and the injustices, racial injustices that have been going on in the US, and talking about police brutality and stuff like that. There was a great big discussion that particularly took place on Twitter amongst different members of the spiritual community. It was a really interesting, really enriching discussion, frustrating in places and shadow worky in places, as I think it should be. But something came out of that for me that I personally feel like I really want to vocalize now for anybody that watches my stuff, and that is that it's not all or nothing. Okay, just because you feel like you can't do everything that you want to do, and you can't be involved in everything that you care about, and you can't go after every plight that's going on in the world and do something about it, doesn't mean that you need to check out and do nothing and, you know, not have any sense of activism or social responsibility in your life. You don't need to think to yourself, well, you know, at another time when I've got all the money, or when I've got all the time, or when I don't have these issues with my own well-being or my own stuff going on, then that will be the perfect time to get into activism or social responsibility, or sign this petition, or do something here. It doesn't need to be like that. Most activists, the vast majority of activists, look, probably all activists, okay, they are active despite the stuff that's going on in their lives, and they find a way to make it work. They find a way to integrate their activism and their social responsibility into their lives and still focus on the stuff that they've got going on. And we can all do the same. It's not the case that you need to believe that you're not worthy of being involved in activism, or you can't do anything to affect change just because you've got stuff going on in your life. Everyone's got some stuff going on in their life, and it's really about you figuring out the extent of the commitment that you can make and that you want to make, and then then factoring that into your life alongside everything else. You know, I think it's kind of like common sense that we don't have to wait for our own lives to be perfect and for all of our issues to be sorted before we hold out our hand to help somebody else. But what we do need to do is make sure that we're not biting off more than we can chew, make sure that we're not going way over our limits and pushing ourselves far too far. And so in order for you to be a good activist, a healthy activist, and somebody who's involved with social activism but also accountable for your own self-care, is to have that talk with yourself. Be honest with yourself about what you can manage and what is too much for you and what you can't manage. Be clear with yourself about what you can do and what you can commit to. And if you do get involved in any kind of collectives, any group activism, any groups of people that are organising on something specific or petitioning or campaigning for something specific, be honest with that group of people about the level of involvement that you think you can have as well. Do not be tempted to go into any situation that involves group activism or group organisation and just be like, yeah, I can give 16 hours or 18 hours a week, I can do all this stuff, I'm happy to do that, I'm happy to do this, and take loads of stuff on, if deep down inside you know that that is too much for you. So it's really about being clear with yourself, and then secondarily, if necessary, with others about the level of involvement that you can give to something. And believe me, I know from experience that this is difficult, and sometimes it is a bit of a blurred line. Sometimes you do think you can do more than you actually can, and for sure sometimes it's really difficult to be honest about the fact that you can't commit the amount that an organisation may need you to commit. I know that for me, a few years ago, I'm not going to name the organisation, but a few years ago I really wanted to be more directly involved with an organisation that work for mental health in this country. And when I found out that we had to commit 16 hours a month, I knew with the commitments that I already had, with the work that I was doing, and with my own need to factor my own mental well-being into the equation, that I actually could not commit to those 16 hours a month. And so I had to bow out. I had to say I can't commit to that. And that was really difficult for me, and I felt a lot of guilt about that at first, and I kind of sat down and really questioned why I couldn't commit those 16 hours, and I beat myself up for walking away. I wouldn't do that now. Now I'm very, very clear about what my needs are, and I'm clear about the fact that it is okay to say I can commit this amount of time or this amount of focus, but I can't do this. This is beyond the scope of what I can do. And actually, you're being way more helpful to an organisation. You're being way more helpful to a movement if you're honest about that from the get-go. So it's not even just about you self-lovingly figuring out what you can do and making sure you don't take on too much. It's also about you being respectful to the organisation or to the cause that you want to give to, by making sure that you don't overcommit and then have to pull back and potentially inconvenience people. Know that if you want to be more involved with helping people, with helping the planet, with showing up for causes, that you can't do everything. You cannot save the world single-handedly all by yourself, honeybee. So if you know that that is a part of your problem and that's really weighing on your heart, you've really got to get clear on that. And the best way to get clear on that, I think, is really to sit down and write a list of the causes that really matter to you. What is it that keeps you up at night specifically? What is it that your heart really lends itself to? Is it animal rights? Is it ecological conservation? Is it the plight of a particular group of people who are struggling with oppression or marginalisation? What is it for you that really kind of makes you think and feel over time? And that's probably the strongest and safest bet for where you should place your energy. Now, of course, people are active with a number of different causes, but even those people, I think, have got to kind of shave those numbers down. They cannot spread themselves too thin over so many different things that it's almost like they're trying to save the world. They've got to be honest about the fact that they're only one person and they can only commit to a certain amount of causes or to a certain amount of organisations. So take some time to think about what it is that is an important plight for you and then move in that direction. I would definitely think that that is a pretty sound piece of advice for most people. If you look up different advice for people that are involved in activism, that are involved in social justice work, working for marginalised groups, etc., you're probably at some point or another going to come across the gas mask analogy. And I really actually like that analogy, so I'm also going to use it here in this video. And that's just really the idea that obviously when you're on a plane and you're taught what to do if the plane crashes, you are advised to put on your own gas mask before you help somebody else with theirs. And when you look at the pictures on the plane, you know, you've got that little like sort of set of instructions and it goes through and it shows you that you need to put your own mask on first, then you help somebody else with theirs. That's exactly the same premise in activism, in being of service in the world in any way, you need to make sure that your gas mask is on before you help somebody else with theirs. And that's really a lot of what I mean when I talk about giving from the overflow, when I talk about not running on fumes. You can take all of that stuff and you can actually kind of take it over, you can alchemize it over into your life as an activist. You can think about filling up your own tank first, making sure you're okay, making sure you can handle what you're about to step into before you offer to be of service to other people. Now, that's not to say, as I said at the beginning, that you need to have like no problems and nothing that you're dealing with, because that's not realistic. Everybody has shit they're dealing with. But what I mean is that when you move into a role of being an activist for any kind of cause, the issues that you're dealing with, the subject matter that you're going to be around and that you're going to be learning about is distressing, it is frustrating, it can make you feel angry, it can make you feel sad, it can get you very tearful. So really what you need to know is that you've got strength and you've got positivity in your own life so you can deal with those things when you are interfacing with them. So think about, for example, your relationship to your physical body, your exercise routine, your diet. Are you eating the right things? Are you keeping yourself strong physically? How's your sleeping pattern looking? Are you taking care of yourself in that way? Are you making sure that you have a strong support network? Are you making sure that if you're going to counselling or therapy that you are attending those appointments and you're allowing yourself to work through your own stuff? For a lot of people, a big part of their kind of activism gas mask, if you like, is being able to talk to other people who are involved in activism, who care deeply about certain things, who are trying to make changes by campaigning, by petitioning, by raising awareness, by protesting, by whatever means. And it's really about engaging with those people who also struggle with those same issues and are also elevated by those same issues. So it's talking to people about what they do for self-care. It's getting that empathy from others who can relate to your situation when you feel that you need more self-care. It's really interfacing with other people who are doing something for some sort of cause or organisation beyond themselves. And you can get a lot of empathy from having discussions with those people and just saying, you know what do you do when you experience burnout? What do you think it would be good for me to do in this situation? And then you can also trade so that when that person needs some space held for them, you can be there to do that as well. And people do this all the time. You know, mothers do this together, for example. They speak to each other on those terms, on those empathetic terms, where they acknowledge that they both probably do have similar experiences. A lot of people that do my kind of job interface with each other and talk to each other. You know, spiritual counsellors, card slingers, Reiki practitioners, astrologers, they get together in Facebook groups or whatever, or on Skype, and they talk to each other about what's involved with that, you know, making sure that we don't take on our clients' stuff, making sure that we're practicing psychic hygiene, talking about what to do if XYZ situation arises. You know, it's really about empathy, and people that are working for causes can have that as well. They can have that empathy, they can band together. And that's not to say that what's good for one activist is necessarily going to be good for you in your activism and your being of service, but having that empathy and having that conversation can be really important and can make the world of difference when you need it. Your desire to be self-caring while you do good work in the world is not self-indulgent. It's not self-indulgent, it's not selfish. Try to imagine, and this is something that I do say a lot in my work, and I think it could always stand to be underlined. Try to imagine that you are trying to help somebody that you love to foster a greater practice of self-care and really look after themselves and check in with themselves. Think about the advice that you would give to them, the support and the encouragement that you would give to them, the space you would hold for them. That's the same kind of way that you need to treat yourself. So it's no good kind of talking to somebody else about self-care and saying, you know, you need to make sure you look after yourself, you need to make sure you prioritise your needs as well. It's no good doing that if you then can't use that and do the same thing for you. Do the same thing for you. It's so important. Talk to yourself as you would a beloved friend and say to yourself, you know what? You've done enough for today. You've got to think about you. Or you know what, something isn't working here. Take some time to really breathe, sit with yourself and ask yourself what's missing. What do you need to do to up your level of self-care? You know, so really think about how you approach other people when they come to you and it's clear that they're in a state of burnout or they're experiencing fatigue or they really just need to think about themselves more, and consider how you would treat those people whom you love who would need that encouragement from you to be more self-caring. And then you've got to take that and you've kind of got to flip it and direct it towards yourself. What you want to do to help and what you can do to help is valid, okay? You don't have to be part of a group organisation just because other people are. You can do something solo. You can do something meaningful on your own if you want to. You don't have to go out on the streets and protest if you feel like that's beyond the scope of what you can do. You can campaign in other ways. You can do it online. You can petition. You can call your congressman. You can call up parliament. You can write emails, you know. You can do all of these other kinds of things. You can work out what works best for your personality, what works best for you, and take action in that way. You don't have to take action necessarily in the way that other people do. Just know that you can find a way to take action that makes sense for you. Your commitment can be flexible. It can be flexible depending on your own needs and depending on what's going on with you. But if you do become part of a community, if you do get into a group organisation of some kind, like I said before, make sure that you only take on the level of commitment that you feel quite certain that you can carry out. And if you do need to step back from that commitment, I highly recommend communicating that up front and just being real about it rather than walking away from your commitment without saying anything. Because when you walk away from your commitment without saying anything, when you don't answer your calls, when you don't email the organisation and tell them what's going on with you, it makes it really, really hard to walk back into activism at a time when you're better equipped to do so. And it also just makes you tend to feel worse about yourself. It makes you feel crappy about yourself because you feel like you haven't done things the right way. So if you do need to step back on a commitment, just be honest about that. Just say that your circumstances have changed and you need to step back for an undisclosed period of time and you'll be in touch in the future, or change the way that you are making that commitment, you know. For me, I know that at the moment I couldn't make any more of a commitment to the homelessness organisation in my area because of the way my business works. I know that they need volunteers. This is just me talking about my situation now. I know that they need volunteers to open up their space that they've got in the town centre for more hours, because that's where they take their donations, that's where they take their deliveries of clothes and stuff like that for the homeless and people in vulnerable situations. I would love to be able to volunteer to go and open up the shop, but because the way my job is set up means that times are booked by clients and they're booked sporadically and kind of ad hoc, I know that I can't make that commitment. So instead, I've made the commitment to making sure that I do a weekly delivery to the food bank. And that at the moment is the extent of what I know that I can commit. I would like to commit more, but I'm not going to make that commitment because I know that it's not feasible. And I know that as much as I would like to, I'm going to end up probably disappointing people, probably not doing what I set out to do. I also make sure that I'm really involved in the social media for the organisation that I want to support, so that I can see when they've got ad hoc funding campaigns coming up for different things that people in the area need. So I can also donate financially to those things, and I can also just offer encouragement to the woman who runs the organisation. So it's really about knowing that I'm working within my means to do what I can for something that's really important to me and something that I care about. So that's just an example from me where I would like to be able to commit more, but I won't, because I don't want to create that sense of disappointment for myself and also for the organisation. So really just be real about what you can commit, don't overcommit, and if you recognise that you have overcommitted, try as hard as you can to just communicate that honestly to the organisation rather than walking away and not saying anything. When you want to be involved in activism, when you want to campaign for change on any level, it's obvious that whatever you're campaigning towards, whatever you're involved in, is of great importance to you. And whenever something is of great importance to you, there is always a danger that you can become fixated upon it. Try not to do that. Try not to become inundated with the news reports about something, looking at it first thing in the morning when you wake up, looking at it last thing before you go to sleep at night, not giving yourself much headspace for anything else. Try to avoid that, because all you're going to do is make it so that you can't really have a sustainable role in campaigning for change in that area. I know that for me, there are things that I'm really concerned about and things that really upset me and things that I fucking wish would change and would get better and things that I want to give my energy to. But I know at the same time, I can't look at that stuff all the time and look at every update all the time and involve myself in thinking about it every single day, because it would get to this point where it was not healthy for me, for my well-being. So make sure that you're checking in with whatever your cause is, whatever your organisation is, at a pace that is good for you. Make sure that you're not becoming fixated. Make sure you're not becoming obsessed. There are ways of knowing when you're becoming obsessed. If the people around you are telling you that it's all you ever talk about, if the people around you that love you are telling you that maybe you ought to pull back on the amount of information that you're taking tuning in because it's clearly upsetting you. Those kinds of things can be signs that you're becoming obsessed. If you really struggle to think about anything else, then it's really important that you come back to a sense of center. Worrying and worrying and worrying and worrying about whatever cause you're giving yourself to is not going to help anything. So recognize that you're doing your part, and then make sure that you've got that downtime, you've got that leisure time, you've got that time to relax and regenerate and enjoy yourself and have fun. I know that when you're really concerned about all of the different plights that are going on in the planet right now, it can feel really guilt-inducing to have fun, but it's actually really important that you let go and let yourself have fun. It really is. I remember watching a Lena Dunham interview, and I know she's a bit of a problematic fave for a lot of people, but I was just randomly watching this interview that she did with Caitlin Moran, and she said that her father always used to say to her, "Fear doesn't land the plane." And what he meant by that was, you know, you sitting around worrying on the plane because there's turbulence, that's not what's going to land the plane. The pilot who's going to stay calm and focus on the next right action, that's the person that's going to land the plane. And that really affected me. That went in somewhere and I absorbed that. And now I think to myself, fear doesn't land the plane. Worry doesn't land the plane. What can I do? And after I've done what I can do, let me go on to doing something else, and let me not become completely obsessed, you know? That's a very important thing when you're involved in activism, when you're involved in causes. Essentially what I'm trying to say is know when to switch off, know that you can't look at this stuff 24/7. It's not healthy, it's not helpful. One thing I will say is that if you spend time with a lot of other people who are involved in causes, who are concerned about social responsibility, etc., and who have a lot of emotions and a lot of thoughts about the stuff that's going on in the world, you might want to sometimes communicate to them that you are really at capacity when it comes to talking about certain things, and this might also really help them as well. Sometimes we can get ourselves into a bit of a loop of various different echo chambers where when we get together with certain people, our causes and our concerns and the plights that we're involved in, they're the only things that we end up talking about. And I would recommend that it's okay for you to be able to say, I really want to spend time with you, but at the same time I'd love to talk about something different. I'm really at capacity with this, you know, it's just really stressing me out and upsetting me, and I feel like other than the work that we do together, I'd rather not talk about it at the minute. You can even agree with one of your fellow kind of activists, one of your fellow campaigners, that you're going to spend time together where you do not talk about the cause that you're involved with, and you just like have a cup of coffee and talk about other things, or go and do something which is in no way linked to the work that you do with social activism. And you've got to know as well when it's probably a good idea for you to stay away from certain things, like certain gatherings or certain meetings, because it's not necessarily going to be good for your headspace. You don't need to feel obligated to turn up to every single thing or put yourself into a situation where you're thinking overtime about something that you're already thinking overtime about, and you know that it's actually not helping you. So definitely feel that you can set a limitation with that, and if you need to voice that limitation to other people who are also involved in organising around the same cause, then what you might find is that you're giving those people permission to kind of spend not all of their time thinking about it and talking about it. You know, sometimes somebody needs to know that it's okay to talk about a different subject. Just relax, get off the subject for a little while so that you can regenerate. Choose your battles. That is a very important thing. Sometimes there are battles that are just not worth fighting. Sometimes you do have to walk away from a heated discussion that is going to go nowhere, that is only going to serve to end up in some kind of intellectual cul-de-sac, you know. Sometimes you've got to save your energy for the bigger fight. Sometimes you've got to reserve your power and your potency for something bigger. I'm not going to go into that too much more because I think it's such a nuanced thing and it's so complex and it varies from person to person, but I have for sure decided not to hit send on things that I knew on social media, for example, were not going to make a difference. I've definitely held my tongue on a few occasions in situations where I knew that there was absolutely no point getting into a conversation with somebody who probably had only brought the subject up to bait me anyway. Sometimes you've got to reserve your energy for the bigger fight, for the things that are really important, and it is okay to do that, and you've got to know in your heart of hearts when that is what you are doing, and that is okay. It is okay to do that. Not every single battle is worth fighting. Not every single battle is worth getting your armour on for. Sometimes someone is just trying to bait you, and frankly don't give them the satisfaction. What I'm trying to say, to be honest, is that you don't have to RSVP to every single shit show you're invited to. You have to use your intuition to determine when something is just essentially not a good idea and when it's not going to go anywhere good. I am not saying that you should not engage with people that disagree with you. I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to help somebody to understand your point of view or help somebody to see things from your perspective. And I'm certainly not saying that you should never enter into a conversation where somebody who is marginalised is being attacked and may need you on side to help them. I'm not saying that you should never like disarm a conversation or get involved with a conversation, because of course some battles are worth it, but sometimes you've got to decide when a battle simply isn't worth it. And I feel like I've come to this point on my personal journey now where I can do that, and I can understand when my energy is just going to be plainly and simply wasted, and I can decide to take that energy and actually invest it somewhere much more meaningful where it is going to do more good. Involving yourself in a cause which is greater than just your personal life, just your personal shit that you've got going on, is incredible for the journey of self-love. When you see yourself being brave and being conscientious and doing something in the service of something greater than yourself, absolutely you look at yourself with love in that moment and you feel more connected. You feel connected to the divinity that runs through you. You feel more connected to other human beings, but at the same time it takes bravery to do it. We have to do our shadow work when we do activism. We have to do our shadow work when it comes to social responsibility. There are a lot of people out there making a shit ton of various different excuses as to why they're not going to get involved in any cause whatsoever, and actually disparaging people who are involved in trying to actively make a difference in various different ways. And those people really need to look within themselves, and that is a part of self-love too. It's really important for you to understand your own resistance towards doing something to make change, towards doing something for a cause that actually deep down inside you do feel passionately about. You've got to look at your inaction, you've got to recognize it through the lens of shadow work, and maybe that is where you are in your journey of self-love right now. Sometimes being active to help fight for something, being aware of a cause, trying to make other people aware of that cause, donating or volunteering to help with that cause, those things go against the grain. They might go against the things that your family believe. They might go against the things in the community where you live. You might feel like you'll be alienated from your friends if you're honest about the fact that you care about these things and you're sick of the injustice and you want to see things change. And so it's going to take courage and it's going to take bravery for you to come out of your shell and stand in your power and say, actually, I don't think this is right, and you guys do what you want to do, but I'm going to go and help with this. I'm going to do something about this. This doesn't feel right to me. It does take bravery to do that, and it does take courage to do that. And if you are in a situation where you're disparaging other people for doing that, or you're making your excuses as to why you can't, and somewhere inside that's eating away at you, then it would be self-loving to get that out on the table and examine that. Believe me, because I've been in that situation myself. I'm not above it, I'm not beyond it, and sometimes I still work through it now. So I'm not telling you, I'm not giving you this advice from this place of superiority, where I'm like a social activist extraordinaire and I'm, you know, trying to say that people that aren't involved in anything to do with activism or organising for change are beneath me. I'm saying it from a place of understanding. I've been there. I've really had to look at myself and examine why the inaction, why the resistance, why even the judgment towards people who are active, who are fighting for causes, who are trying to make change, who are trying to help others, why that judgment, and does it come from a shadowy place? I've had to ask myself those questions. Maybe you also do need to ask yourself those questions if you find that you are currently seated in your inaction and you don't like that about yourself. You would be absolutely amazed, to be honest with you, how little you sometimes have to do to make an overwhelmingly positive effect in a person's life and help somebody to feel bolstered and empowered in their struggle. There are so many people, and this is harking back to the conversation that happened last year about Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. It was really interesting. There were a lot of people during that conversation that were saying that they didn't really believe that being vocal about their support of any cause on social media makes any difference. That couldn't be more wrong. That couldn't be more fucking wrong, honestly. Any cause that you care about, anything you want to advocate for, anything, whether it's Black Lives Matter or not, whatever, anything you want to advocate for. If you have a social media platform, if you interact online, it is helpful and it is an act of service to be vocal. It sometimes requires bravery, as I've just said, and it does make a difference. I know that when I have made certain videos or certain statements or posted things on social media, I have had people say to me, thank you, that turned my whole fucking day around. Just to know that it concerns you, just to know that you even know about what went on there is important to me. It's bolstered me. Thank you for that. And it does bolster people. It makes people feel seen in the darkness. Just to know that you're there and you care and you are reading an article about it, or you are concerned about it, or you have just donated a little bit of something to a cause, you know, to the cause that matters to someone else. It creates unity, it creates connections, it does mean something, it is important, it does potentially open up somebody else's eyes who didn't know about the cause and can learn about it. And it certainly helps people who are marginalised by the issues or struggling because of the issues feel seen. And that is important, and that is power, and that is majesty, and that is magic. That is fucking magic. And you can do that today. You can do that right now. Finally, I just want to go out by reading this quote that I found online while I was thinking about the kinds of things that I wanted to say in relation to this topic. And the quote is by somebody called Kim Tran, who is a member of the Third Woman Press Collective and actually does workshops on uprooting anti-black racism in Asian American community, which I think is fucking radical. And Kim wrote this, and this is in relation to taking downtime, to not pushing yourself too much, you know, not pushing yourself to do more and more and more until you kind of burn out. Kim wrote, "We live in a capitalist world that places a premium on being busy. We live in a world that tells us that if we aren't working on something, anything, be it homework, launching an iPhone app, or even social justice all the time, that we are in fact wasting time. But we need to ask ourselves whether we want our movements to resemble the very same models we're actively fighting against. Are we willing to make our lives about more than the hours that we work, even if those hours are in service to our communities? Sometimes saying no is a radical act of self-care that's as vital to our struggles as the marches, teach-ins and walkouts in which we participate." So that's where I wanted to end things today. I hope these insights have been helpful, and I hope that they have gone in where needed and at least triggered some thoughts and reflections in you. I would love to read your comments on this one. Any and all comments are welcome as long as they're respectful. So much love and self-love, and until next year, guys, this has been Self-Love September. Mwah, blessed be. Oh, I found an altar space. Just set up here.